Shifting gears here, let's talk a little bit about Ash Wednesday, Lent, Good Friday, all of that stuff here. Of course, we just had Ash Wednesday, beginning the Lenten period, 40-day period from Ash Wednesday and before Easter Sunday. It's also often spoken of as 40 days of fasting. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from Jesus in the New Testament, who fasted for 40 days. It also comes from Moses in the Old Testament, who fasted for 40 days on Mount Sinai, but especially from Jesus and the Christian tradition. And so that's kind of where the notion of Lent comes from. It was especially formalized right around after the Council of Nicaea in 325. And it's obviously taken on some developments and changes throughout the centuries. At this point, I don't think you can really speak of it as 40 days of fasting, not at least according to how it's mandatory and required on part of Latin Rite Catholics. Now, obviously, a person can take upon additional penance and actually fast for 40 days. But in reality, despite people saying that's 40 days of fasting, it is not 40 days of fasting. It's actually 2 days. And you could, uh, again, do more than that, but in so far as what's required, it's only actually 2 days of fasting. And even then, um, I don't know how we could even speak of the word fasting given how it's defined. Let me show you. So this little flyer notes what is fasting? Well, fasting is considered one meal a day and two smaller meals, which, if added together, would not exceed one full meal. Um, it's it seems like we've redefined what fasting means here uh, to mean the opposite of what fasting actually is. Because if you can have a meal and two smaller meals, how can we really call that fasting? Okay, but that's considered fasting. When does it apply? Again, it's not for every day. It's not for 40 days. You would think whenever there's discussion about 40 days of fasting, you would think that fasting is done every day. No, no. It's done only 2 times in the Lenten period. One on Ash Wednesday and one on Good Friday. So on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, you can have a full meal and then two small meals, as long as those two small meals, if combined together, do not equal one full meal or exceed one full meal. They could equal one full meal, but not exceed it. And simultaneous to this, there's also a little bit of abstinence going on. What is the abstinence? Well, there is abstinence from eating meat. So flesh and organs of mammals and fowl. And that is on Ash Wednesday, Good Friday, and all Fridays of Lent, about 6 or so of them. So all Fridays of Lent, no meat. And also on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, no meat. Um, in other words, you can have meat pretty much every other day during Lent, except for Fridays, Ash Wednesday, and Good Friday. In addition to no meat, however, you can have fish. Okay. Is where you get the notion of fish fries at churches. Who's required? Well, Catholics between the age of 18 and 59, and those who are not sick. Um, and that's for the fasting aspect. For the abstinence aspect, is going to be mandatory for everyone older than 14 years old. A lot of people have criticized this. I've seen it from a lot of people, and I really understand it. Um, it's really hard to speak of this as 40 days of fasting, as actual fasting, in light of the absolute bare minimum requirements here. Now, some will say, but yeah, but you can still take on additional penances and additional fasting. That's true. But why even make this mandatory if the minimum is going to be so, if the bar is going to be so low, why even have something mandatory? Why not just say, hey, you figure it out on your own kind of thing? If you're going to have something mandatory, wouldn't you have a little bit more than just 2 days of fasting? And wouldn't you make the requirements for fasting just a little bit more than that? This is why a lot of people don't take any of this seriously, and they have scoffed and mocked the notion of fasting, as at least we see it here in the Latin Rite. And the Eastern Catholic rites aren't that much better, to be honest. So, you'll see a lot of people criticizing this, and I think that there are some legitimate criticisms with it. You kind of wonder why the bishops wouldn't maybe um, make this a little bit more serious. Perhaps people would take it more seriously. In addition, you also have the notion of fasting right before the Mass, but that takes place 1 hour before you receive the Eucharist, which means you can be eating a Big Mac while you walk up the steps entering the church as the liturgy begins, and you probably should be fine because from the beginning of the liturgy until the time you receive the Eucharist, it's been about an hour. So again, a lot of people have criticized this, and I think that there are some legitimate criticisms here, and it's almost laughable to even speak of this as 40 days of fasting. I think that more could be done, and people, of course, should be encouraged to take on additional acts of penance because as far as the bare minimum, what's required, it is kind of a joke. Hey, have you been benefiting from this channel, but you're not supporting it?
You're definitely guilty.
Get over to patreon.com/Reason and Theology and support this channel if you've been benefiting from the content.
Did I say get it done now?
I mean right now!
And if you can't support the show financially, you should at least be subscribed, right? Am I right or am I right?
Yeah, I think he's right.
I'm right. So go and hit the subscribe button right now.